Black the Name by D.B. Halpert. Narrated by the author, D.B. Halpert.
Chapter 16. Rat Hunting. The four companions weave through the streets of Ir Flamar. The morning crowd busy rivals the crowd of the day before, making the trek slow, but following the street signs, some of which sit in great repair, with beautiful paintings forming the street names, while others are barely able to be read. Elizabeth and Pearl lead Aldrin and Auburn to a precariously elaborate but functional storefront, from which a sign hangs over the door reading 641 Jap Alchemy and Medicine. The door swings open, sounding a small bell that it strikes, with Elizabeth presenting the building to the others, displaying for the first time in a while her age, through her pride. The room through the door is very small compared to what the group was expecting. A wall immediately to the left of the door runs the short distance to a waist-high counter that separates the building into pieces. To the right of the door is a small area with a dirty faded purple rug and 3 cushioned seats that sit patiently empty. Beyond the counter, the majority of the structure's space waits cluttered with shelves strewn with jars and pouches of strange items and serums. The far wall beyond the counter conceals another room with the door into built in the center of the wall of the left half of the space, mirrored by a desk placed firmly against the wall at the center of the right half, with a single shelf lined with several flasks of a brilliant green liquid above it that seems to almost glow. Sat at the desk is a hunched-over figure in a dirty brown robe, whose form shifts at the sound of the doorbell. The man stands and turns to face his guests, and grabbing one of the bottles from the shelf above his desk, he approaches the counter, swigging the strange green liquid. Putting the empty flask in a pouch to his side, the man slams his hands impatiently onto the counter, raising one of his black eyebrows to meet the curling black mob of hair that drapes greasily over his head, over his deep tan skin. The man's curious eyes scan the unfamiliar collage of people to enter his shop, while he asks in a scriptural, rolling cadence of a voice, "Welcome to my establishment. How is it that my services can be used to better you? Do you know what type of elixir you're looking for?" Elizabeth puts a finger up to get the stranger's attention, responding, "Well, we have a few questions about your notices." "Really?" the man asks rhetorically, grabbing his pointed goatee. Stroking the curly black facial hair, the man continues, "Which notices would you be referring to?" Aldrin steps between Elizabeth and the counter, explaining, "Just one contract. The one you posted about rats stealing your ingredients. What can you tell us about these rodents?" "What is there to know? A month or so ago, I noticed some of my supplies began to go missing. A few days after I started noticing these disappearances, I caught a glimpse of a thief. A large rat, as big as a dog. Maybe it made its way into the sewers from here." A grin forms on Elizabeth's face, and she nudges Pearl's side, smirking. "I told you they would be in the sewers." I honestly have no more information for you on the matter. I trust the offered reward will suffice for payment, and no further negotiation will be necessary." The man continues, looking curiously toward Elizabeth. Turning to be able to just see Elizabeth in his periphery, Aldrin continues to ask, "Could you tell us where you saw the rat enter the sewers?" Re-engaging contact with Aldrin, Alfredo points to his left and explains, "Once it was out of my shop, it went down the storm drain on the corner." With a nod, Aldrin turns, leaving the building, joined by Auburn, who is more than eager to exit the strongly perfumed scented shop. Pearl rolls her eyes, falling out the door after Aldrin, exclaiming, "You really are no fun, Mr. All Work No Play." Elizabeth, alone with the alchemist in his store, steps to the counter, pulling from her bag the exceptionally old weathered notice, mumbling a soft question. "Do you think any of the untested formulae could change me? Make me into something beautiful? Make me less of a monster?" Curious, Alfredo leans over the counter, staring deep into Elizabeth's eyes, responding, "Perhaps, but there is nothing I see about you that I would consider monstrous." "Come on, Lizzie!" Pearl's voice bellows in from out the door and down the street a short way. "I wanted to know. Perhaps we will continue this conversation when my friends and I have taken care of your rat problem," Elizabeth expresses with a soft sternness in her voice, before turning to the door with an intentional flip of her hair, steps out to join the others. Once outside, she sees Pearl wave to her from down the street before beginning to climb down an open manhole. A surprisingly long climb brings the four into a gargantuan chamber with equally large tunnels leading from it. Floating orbs of blue illuminate the expanse, which staggers the group as they look around them. Auburn, with an untrusting, wide-eyed, observant glare, asks in response to the strange size of the subterranean space, "Why would a port have such a large space all beneath it? Would it not just constantly flooded? To think of it, how come is it not flooded?" Stepping from her companions to one of the tunnels leading away, running her fingers along the wall, letting her hand pass just under the blue light sources, Pearl responds, "Well, if they didn't have such a large space, the streets would flood much more often. On why we are not currently underwater, well, that is because we are on the continent of the elves. The most magically advanced race is bound to have some way of draining sub-sea level caverns quickly, and the ability to keep them drained. Wouldn't you think?" Elizabeth jogs to catch up to Pearl, leaving the others agreeing, "I mean, it makes sense." And turning back to Auburn with an honest but awkward smile, he asks, "Right?" His expression not changing but shifting focus onto Elizabeth, Auburn walks after the women. "The use of magic as a utility makes me uncomfortable is all." The air is thick with the vapors of stagnant seawater and sewage, which sits in a passive river that extends through the channel in the center of the tunnel. The tan gray stones of the wall and floor tap underfoot, ever moist, but without a single sign of being slick. The four walk for several minutes in the soft silence of trickling sewage flowing from streams that fall into the trough below, where smaller tunnels connect to their path. Finally, Aldrin breaks the silence, asking, "What are we doing? I mean, why are we just walking in the sewers?" Pearl spins on her heel, keeping her lead of the group and shrugging her shoulders, responding, "Well, if you have plans, you can go, but I'm walking until I hear signs of movement other than ours." With Pearl's comment, Auburn stops and turns to return the way they came, only to have his collar grabbed by Aldrin, who growls, "These rats are stealing alchemy materials. A sign of intelligence." and we don't know how far that goes. We need to all be here if they are smarter than we expect. In the same moment, Auburn shifts into a stance to settle the stir of his companions, allowing them to hear the scraping of nails across stone, echoing from a side passage. Gesturing to the path the sound emanates from, Auburn says tiredly to the others, "Well, if rats are what you're kicking for, that sounds like your query. Is it large in tear? Make me a dare breed." With a tongue click and a spinning backwards bow, Pearl laughs, turning to the tunnel and sounds, "Well, then this may be more interesting than you originally thought, couldn't it be? Intelligent, dog-sized rats with alchemical prowess. Sounds like something Vincent J. would have to deal with." With that and a new grin on her face, Pearl leaps over the gap that splits the tunnel, darting into the far passage. Exasperated, Aldrin shrugs before following Pearl, jumping over the sewage stream with the pistons connected to his iron frame at the ankles, firing to launch him across. Auburn joins, leaping the insignificant 5-foot gap with ease and leaving Elizabeth alone on the other side. The scraping claws on stone continues to soften down the small side tunnel, and the three make haste to chase. At the same time, Elizabeth steps to the edge of the gap and looks down into the sewage surface 5 feet below, at the undulating substance too thick with vile refuse to show depth. Not sure she would be able to make the jump, and seeing the others disappear around the corner, Elizabeth decides to continue down the large tunnel in hopes of finding a crossing or chamber that connects the small tunnel and hers again. The blue orbs of light continue down the smaller tunnel to the same at the same interval, keeping the path dimly illuminated. Pearl's feet carry her quickly around a swooping corner after the phantom sound's source. Beyond the curve, Pearl barely stops herself, almost sliding across the ground as a small room opens up before her, and she sees at the other end of the tunnel leading out to the black, lightless, a small platform rises to her left, where old, badly damaged crates stack upon each other, surrounded by heaps of garbage. Putting her hand out to stop Aldrin and Auburn, Pearl listens to the cold silence, with the putrid smell of the sewers intensifying and becoming more vile in her mouth. Slow, careful steps bring the three into the center of the small room, scanning the darkness, the piles of litter, for any sign of movement. A sudden shift knocks a crate from the top of one of the piles, startling Pearl, Aldrin, and Auburn, and shifting her weight with the panic, Pearl steps onto a loose stone in the floor, pressing it down to the point that something under it breaks. Almost instantly, with the crack that pops under Pearl's boot, a stone falls from the ceiling, striking the ground beside her before a jar filled with large black ants falls from the same spot, shattering on impact with the hard stone floor. The jar sprays forth the large insects that begin to swarm towards Pearl. Stepping away from the chittering pile, Pearl watches the ants disperse into the cracks on the ground, harmlessly attempting to return to their colony. Stepping to the other side of the fallen crate, Auburn points his rifle down at a small figure and with a single head motion gestures to the open of the small room. Following the command cautiously, claw-tipped arms raised, a short reptilian humanoid steps into the light, eyes wide with a shaky gaze that jumps sporadically between the three interlopers in its lair. With a smirk, Pearl rests her hands on her hips, jesting. So you're the rat. Well, wasn't expecting a kobold, but guess couldn't ask for an easier 200 coin. A concerned confusion washes over the bipedal reptile's face when Pearl whips the point of her rapier toward it. But the concern the creature expresses is not for its own life. As in a squeaking, high-pitched growl, it calmly expresses, "Wait, me no rat!" The kobold's words find Pearl's ear just soon enough to stop her blade from piercing its throat, and taken aback, Pearl asks, "Wait, you speak the human tongue?" With a nod, the reptile continues, "I live in sewer. Hear things. Me no rat. Me hide from rat. Forced to serve." Crossing her arms, Pearl's smirk returns from the surprise that had taken her face. "All right, I'll bite. Where's the rat, then?" At the same instant Pearl's question finishes, the cavernous echo of Elizabeth calling out in a panic rings from the dark, lightless tunnel. "Guys!" The worry for Elizabeth kills Pearl's smirk when, looking down the kobold, she sees the creature pointing a shaking talon into the darkness towards the source of Elizabeth's call. With a single motion, Pearl's blade pierces out the back of the small creature's throat and draws back, whipping crimson in a line across the stone floor, leading her into the darkness, calling out, "I'm coming, Lizzie!" Aldrin and Auburn watch Pearl sprint into the darkness. In the time it takes for Auburn to focus his perception in the heat of the environment around him, and Aldrin to lower the visor that allows him to see in low light, Pearl is caught off guard by a hulking figure that, with a monstrous, echoing, deep, rat-like roar, slams a curled fist into her abdomen, throwing her out of the dark and onto her back, by Aldrin and Auburn. As quick as it took Pearl by surprise, the figure hides around the corner, where the short tunnel opens into a far larger room, not allowing Aldrin or Auburn to get a good view of it. "This is after be fin after," Auburn growls with a smile to Pearl before darting forward himself, utilizing his cloak in a way that makes him vanish in the darkness, even to Pearl's eyes, which normally can see in the dark, and Aldrin's enhanced vision. This movement takes Pearl and Aldrin by surprise, and they stare in stunned silence for a moment, watching in the black two arrows whip through the air along paths that end out of sight. With a sickening slick sound that points sliding softly deep into a thick hunch of flesh, the deep rat roar bellows out again with the piercing of the creature's flesh. And through the darkness, Pearl and Aldrin watch a bulky mass of fur and muscle leap past the end of the short tunnel, trailed by a long, powerful rodent tail. Two more arrows zip past the opening, this time in the opposite direction, releasing the same sound as each impact with the monster. And Auburn calls out, breaking Pearl and Aldrin's bewilderment at his prowess. You have to be joining me, or am I taking this thing on my own?" With a cough, Pearl gestures for Aldrin to lead the way, lifting her sword once more in hand, ready to strike. The two run to the end of the short tunnel, their eyes adjusting even more to see in the dark of the black, round chamber. The instant they reach the room, Aldrin drops to a knee, steadying his aim, and a split moment later fires his rifle, releasing a blinding flash of sparks and a thunderous clap, sending the small bullet into the shoulder of the terrifying 10-foot-tall rat man abomination, which falls to the ground next to the marksman, having leapt for him and Pearl. The split moment the creature is downed, it gives Pearl and Aldrin a good look at its bulbous, mutated form, a mix of man and rodent, with rippling, swollen muscles covered in patchy, twitching clusters of wiry fur. A moment is all the two get to observe their quarry, when it, as though completely unfazed by the 4 arrows protruding from it and the impact of the rifle round, swings at Pearl with a long, grime-caked claw, standing in the same motion, releasing an angry, deep, ratty roar. With a quick acrobatic flip, Pearl dodges under the furious swipe and tumbles past several paces. With Pearl getting her footing once more on the slick sewer stones, the attention of the chamber is suddenly shifted to one on the other entrances, where a soft golden light quickly grows. Elizabeth, running, skids in her boots across the slippery stones, entering the chamber, calling her companions, "Pearl! Aldrin! Are you all right?" And seeing the monster for the first time, points and asks almost stammeringly as it recoils from the sudden light, "What is that?" The large chamber softly illuminated by Elizabeth's glowing talisman. Pearl looks to her feet on the edge of one of the gaps that drop down into flowing sewage and looks to the monster, calling back to Elizabeth, That is the rat problem we are fixing." Stomping one foot toward Elizabeth and spreading its arms out, making itself look as large as possible, the creature releases another powerful roar of intimidation. Panicked, Elizabeth instinctively throws her hand forward, and energy pulses from her, sending the moisture of the stone floor beneath her radially out in a small cyclone around her. In the same moment, Elizabeth's hands dance in the air for less than a second, creating a disc of intricate glyphs that take physicality, resonating in place. Recognizing the glyphs, Elizabeth's panic fades, and she presses her hand onto the magic, creation, releasing 2 black, powerful beams from it, both of which spiral around each other, connecting the disc and the creature's chest. The force of the blasts of dark magic pushes the monstrous abomination up and off balance, away from Elizabeth, forcing it to catch itself by shifting its weight. A split instant sees the blasts of magic vanish as quickly as they appeared, leaving Elizabeth standing, glowing, with arms outstretched towards the monster as it catches itself, falling forward onto a knee and fist in a 3-point stance. In the dim golden light, Aldrin watches the creature's movements, seeing the shoulder his shot struck completely regenerated, and notices that with the creature dropping to a knee, the fur on its chest, where Elizabeth's blast hit, falls free from the not charred, but still strangely damaged flesh. Dropping the butt of his rifle to the floor to compress the black powder behind the round bullet, Aldrin takes aim and, with a near point-blank shot, fires his round into the side of the creature and its elongated face, at the same instant in which 3 more arrows bury themselves into the beast's side. The force of the shot throws the monster to the side, where it catches itself with its other arm, and as quick as it was thrown to the side, the large rat face whips back around to face Aldrin. And upon confirmation of his hypothesis, he watches the side of the creature's face reform to an undamaged state, while scoring on its chest remains. The hulking creature angrily stands before facing the annoyance that is Aldrin, and raising its tremendous fist over its head, swings down to crush him. Dropping his rifle to the side with one hand and turning a dial on the side of his mechanical exoskeleton with the other, Aldrin raises his arms up to block, and with the sound of the cracking stone and a rapid release of compression steam, the two forms disappear into a cloud of dust and water vapor. From within the cloud, Aldrin's voice rings out through the whirring sound of a rapidly spinning component of his suit. Magic! The thing is susceptible to magic. Normal attacks will only distract and be a minor inconvenience. Elizabeth, you need to take this thing down. We will distract it for you. The fog begins to settle around Aldrin and the monster, revealing the metal suit locked in place in a small crater in the stone floor, arms extended upward, grasping the rat thing's wrists. Pulling free from Aldrin's suit's grasp, the creature looks down the metal contraption and, ducking down, gives a single upward shove that sends Aldrin up and over Auburn, colliding back with the wall next to the entrance he came in from. Pearl, astonished at the whole ordeal with this, turns to Elizabeth, calling out with a smile, "You've got this, Lizzie!" With a flick of the wrist, Pearl raises her rapier and lunges forward, piercing the creature's side. The monster swings powerfully for Pearl, missing as she ducks back and away, again avoiding the blow completely. Rising to an imposing stance over Pearl, the beast raises both arms overhead and strikes down on her like it did to Aldrin, when two more beams of Elizabeth's magic drill into its lower spine. Auburn watches as the creature's arms drop to its side as it turns to face the small, glowing girl, and dropping his bow, he draws his sword before he and the monster both begin running for Elizabeth. Elizabeth begins turning to run the moment the creature turns to face her. Seeing only the corner of her eye, Auburn bound through the center of the chamber, over the gaps, and lead down into the sewage, past mounds of coins and glass that have been gathered in the central circular platform, and with a hunter's look in his eyes, he strikes into the monster rat man as its hind legs leave the ground and pounce on her. Running around the outer edge of the circular chamber, Elizabeth gets to Aldrin as he gets to his feet with a grunt before he leaves her and runs for his rifle. Setting her feet, Elizabeth focuses, pressing forward her hands and letting them free to once more draw the strange hand-sized sigils in the air before her. Energy again surges out as the glyphs take shape, throwing the moisture and several small stones from the floor beneath Elizabeth. Pressing her hand to the magic discs, she again releases a black beam of energy which strikes the creature just after it gets to its feet from Auburn's blade tackle, sending it again to the ground. Fury fills the monster's black, beady, rat-like eyes as it struggles to lift its heavy form to face Elizabeth across the room from it. Auburn again drives the creature down with plunging of his blades into its back. In a single terrifying motion, the monster throws itself to its feet and, grabbing Auburn's waist, launches him across the room at Pearl, who ducks just beneath the humanoid projectile and begins running for the beast. With a spin, the monster turns to the wall behind it, whipping Pearl with its massive leathery tail, knocking her feet out from under her. With a powerful thrust, the rat monster launches itself from the wall to the center of the chamber, where it continues the movement with power, pouncing in a leap for Elizabeth. A thunderous clap rings out from a spray of bright sparks from Aldrin's rifle, and with only inches from its claws being able to grab Elizabeth, the enormous rat monster is thrown to the ground next to her. Elizabeth, filled with a fearful fight or flight dose of adrenaline, presses all of her weight into the glyphs between her and the beast. and a final beam surges into the creature's form, driving it into the ground, where it becomes still as blood begins to pool out of its mouth and nose. Heavy breaths push from Elizabeth's chest, who lets her arms rest, with swirling pressure of her magic around her fading. Groans fill the large round chamber as Pearl, Auburn, and Aldrin push themselves from the ground, and breaking the rest of the tension, Pearl laughs. Well, that was certainly something. Now who wants to bet the lucky coin is one of those in the pile? Before anyone can respond to Pearl's sarcasm, the large form jerks and shifts on the stone floor. Curling into a ball, the body trembles at it as it begins collapsing in upon itself, shrinking down until the naked, hairless body of a man is left where the monster was. The motion scares Elizabeth, who by the time the transformation stops, finds herself behind Aldrin, who at the same moment the still returns, begins cautiously approaching the corpse, aiming his rifle at it, ready to fire. The body remains curled upon itself, breathless, still, and pressing his rifle into the man's shoulder, Aldrin rolls the body onto its back, confirming its lifelessness. Hopping to the central platform, Pearl kicks one of the piles of coin. So I guess this stuff is ours now. It would be a pain to have to get to find the proper owner, Auburn responds, picking up his bow. Cool, I claim this, Pearl exclaims, pulling from within the pile she kicked a strange-looking shoulder bag embroidered with an unsettling smile, and dropping to her knees, opens the bag, shoving coins into it, where they seem to simply vanish. I'll gather this stuff up. We can sort it out when we aren't snorting feces.